What's up, sassy gamers? Welcome to Got Our Attention Podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 5. I'm Mike, your host, and I'm with Brian and Bruno today. And we're going to take a stroll down somewhat memory lane. Actually, this is a really interesting topic for me personally. I knew Bruno as well, somewhat, but it was something I was sitting there kind of toying around. I was like, I think this would be a great topic to cover, and I kind of enjoyed it once I started going down the rabbit hole. It was even more interesting. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the history of survival games. I'm waiting for the crickets because I'm waiting for people to be like either really into it or like, okay, I'm out.
We don't broadcast live anymore, so you won't know. You'll just have to.
Yeah, that's true.
Have to like
just
raw
feel
dog
it.
it.
We'll have to
go.
So I wanted to talk about the history of survival games. So I did look online. I was trying to find the history of survival games one day, and that's kind of what kind of brought me into wanting to cover this, because I couldn't really find like where it really came from, and not in a really, without me having to do a lot of digging. And by that point, I was like, well, shit, I might as well just do it myself. So buckle up. This is a history lesson, and here we go. So before I can actually get into this, we have to kind of talk about what led up to this genre of game. And basically the year is 1982, right? So we have video game consoles that are in the market right now. They've been around for about 10 years because Magnavox Odyssey came out in 1972, and then you had the Atari 2600 that released in 1977. So Atari 2600 a little fairly new. But during this time, most of those games that were basically released were either action, racing, strategy, or even sometimes educational. And most of that was because obviously they were limited to the hardware that the consoles they built. And some of these games were launched with the cassette or with the consoles. And it was just kind of, fairly new. And they're trying to figure things out, see how this would work with the small amount of resources they had for hardware. So fast forward 1982. And there's a company called Arcadia Corporation. They created a device that is called the StarPath Supercharger. And it was for the Atari 2600. And the idea behind this supercharger was that it would actually connect the same way a cartridge would. So imagine a Game Genie or something in the future where you could just plug it straight into the cartridge area, and then it had like an adapter. So same kind of concept. It would actually connect into the cartridge of the Atari 2600. But it had a special connector on the other side, which would actually be used to plug into an audio cassette tape recorder. So it had like a cable, it would come out, and a little jack on one side, you'd plug it in. So they actually, this company, Arcadia, they actually created games under the StarPath that were released on these game cassettes. And these ROM-based games had instructions on there, and also tell them when to push the player to push the button on the tape player. And usually these would take a little bit longer to load, just because it, had to try to go through this whole process. And but because of this, because of the supercharger and the ability to load games on a cassette tape rather than a cartridge, it allowed for more visual effects to be used because of the increased RAM that the supercharger added to the system. So we're talking the Atari 2600 had 128 bytes of memory. And then with the supercharger, they would increase that to 6,272 bytes of RAM. So they went from 128 to 6,000 by using this little device. The device was listed, I think it was at like $59 or $49.99 at the time. But it would come with the game, so one cassette to come with it. And then each game, since they were all tape-based, cassette tape-based, they could be produced a lot cheaper. So they were price pointed at like $15. Which is a lot cheaper than, most of the cartridges they would find for the Atari 2600. And on top of that, the graphics and everything were like a lot better. So this was such an interesting concept that they were able to, push out a bunch of different games at higher graphic levels. And it was kind of like, even published in some old Billboard magazine articles, like, this is the future. Like, this is, we can't wait to see how this is going to go. It's obviously, a different type of cassette tape, so you can load a larger game on there because of the tape, easier to make, different price point. So it was pretty exciting. Seemed like a new thing to do.
Clearly, based on this footage, we have determined that yes, Doom can run on a 2600.
Yeah, really.
With supercharger.
I don't know.
So The
kind
interesting
of a game
part
within a game here. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
almost like the patent that I think recently got released for being able to play a game in a pause or loading screen.
Oh wow. So why is this all important, right? So the Arcadia company, the Arcadia Corporation, they eventually changed their name to Starpath due to legal reasons, because there was another company that came out with something called the Arcadia device or something. Whatever, that's not important. And eventually, through obviously, being a company and new and things happen, and a venture capital company at that, they actually merged with this other company called, I think it's pronounced Epyx, EPYX, who also had similar common investors, venture capital companies that were basically owned them. But after a few different ventures, eventually Starpath basically went bankrupt.
I would like to also point out that they seem to have released this game that looks like an upgraded version of the original adventure game on the 2600.
It does, yeah.
And it's called Dragon Stomper.
There you go. I like it.
That's just sick.
So eventually they go bankrupt, and towards the end of their streak, they had all this inventory they needed to get rid of, and they ended up selling their rights and all their games and everything to an A&B sales company. And what they also received was 2 unreleased games. One was called Swords of Sorrows, and the other was called Survival Island. Now, this was great because these games were never released, and I don't know if that's because they just didn't get there yet, or they just didn't decide these games were, something they wanted to release. Nevertheless, the company got these, and they didn't have any boxes to come with. They didn't have any instructions. So literally, they switched everything over to mail order only because they're just trying to get rid of the stuff. But because of that, you were able to purchase these 2 unreleased games as well. And literally, if you ordered Survival Island, you would get this in the mail for $15, and it would be a cartridge just in like a Ziploc bag. They literally have a quote that says just ordered in a baggie. So again, no instructions, no box. It's just, here's the game on a tape, and you're going to play it. So
also, I mean, that's dating myself a little bit, but I actually remember that. I remember walking into the Software Etc. Or the Babbages, and you would have those carousels where they put a whole bunch of items on, and they would have baggies. That's how you got Doom, because Doom was sold in a baggie, and it was just the original demo X levels.
Oh wow!
It was
I think I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you'd get in a baggie, and then you could upgrade it later. But
yeah,
I don't.
You would only get Doom 1, and then Doom 2 was you had to unlock it essentially, if I remember correctly.
Doom 2 was actually a sequel.
Not Doom 2, but the second level, a different map completely. It was a whole different thing.
Different generation for me, because I still remember the first game I ever bought brand new in a store. Yes, it was specifically Pokemon Blue. And
I had red personally, but
Pokemon Blue who?
Oh god! So why this is important is the game Survival Island. Survival Island is online, and this is as much research as I could find, is credited to be actually the first survival game. Now, online it says it was released in 1982, but throughout the history that I've found, they didn't release this. So it was something that after they sold everything out, that's when this game became a game. So technically, 1984 is when they closed down. So 1984 technically should be the release date for this game. Either way. But it's credited to be the first survival game ever. So this game was the first game to feature the food and water mechanic. Now, I know that seems super basic in most games now, especially in the survival genre. It's food and water is the thing you always have. But in this game, what it was broken up into 3 different parts, and the first part was called Shipwrecked, second part was Wilderness Island, and the third part was Secret Temple. And you would have to, in the first part, Shipwrecked, you're in the ocean, in this little raft, and you're basically swimming back and forth trying to get to this island that you'd see would start getting closer the longer you were able to play. And by floating through the water, you would see things you could pick up that would give you food and water. And then at times you'd have to be chased by like a shark or something. Shark. And then you'd have to like try to get away from that so you don't get hurt. And it was just like the concept of not only keeping your health to like 100%, it was also you had to eat food and you had to drink water. Once you got on the land portion of this wilderness island, it was the same concept. You could move, it looked almost similar to Pitfall. You kind of move left to right, but it was a little more free motion. You can go up and down as well on the screen. But there was also, things trying to kill you like snakes and things. And then, but also at the time you have to monitor your food and your water intake. So that way you'd stay alive and then your health wouldn't go down. So this game really kind of pioneered the whole start of this survival aspect of a game. And it was something that was almost not even released at this point. So that's kind of what we're going to start with. So past this 1985, you're probably familiar with this game. It's called Oregon Trail, which if you ever had a old Apple II computer in school, it was created by Minnesota Education Computer Consortium, MECC. And the idea was you take a party of 5 and you would take them from Independence, Missouri, all the way to Oregon's Willamette Valley. And the idea is when you start the game, you must gather your rations, your supplies, and all these things, because the idea is you're going to be in a caravan with like a couple oxes pulling you across to the new world essentially. But the trail isn't friendly because there is no roads, there's no path, there's no interstate. It's like you're trying to just survive. So in that sense, that's the survival portion of it. But it also made you have different decisions, and not to mention, instead of just being a single player character that you're trying to take care of, you're also looking after a full group. So whether it's your family, and you get to name these people at the beginning of the game, and you get to decide throughout the adventure, if you call it an adventure, you get to decide like maybe someone passes away because you don't have the material that you need, or maybe you don't want to use it. You want to save that material because
food.
You don't have enough food, you don't have enough ammo, or someone gets syphilis or dysentery, which is everybody always talks about. Usually it's the biggest joke. So that was kind of the first game that introduced not only the survival mechanic, but also as a group. Like you're having to maintain like a group of people to make decisions based on ethics, like what's right, what's wrong. So very interesting on that. And the next one, moving into 1986, it's a game called Wilderness, a survival adventure. And this was a first-person game, more of like a kind of like a point and click, essentially. Like you would go left and right, and you could see different landscapes, fairly drawn out in this Atari. But the neat thing about it was it actually was one of the first ones that showed not just inventory, but also all the inventory you had, but also the weight that correlated with those items. So not only would you have to eat and drink, you'd have to also be mindful of the amount of things you're carrying, because like you could only carry so much. So you would actually get encumbered. Like you couldn't carry that much. So it's one of those games that actually introduced that. And, that's pretty big in the survival horror or survival area.
Pretty terrible. 40 years later, pretty terrible that we still have encumbrance. I also love the fact that it's actually being drawn out a lot of times in text.
Yeah. And that's how you would move is you type in like look right, look left, so forth and so on. So pretty interesting on that. I mean, the game necessarily wasn't the best, but it was just the fact that it had those mechanics, which was a little different than normal. And a lot of this too came from Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of this too, because you had the same sort of things within that.
You got to be impressed by the manual in this thing.
I know. I've seen that right there in some of the games that like we have out now, like The Forest or something.
Like, I mean, this almost looks like this should be the manual for Valheim.
Yeah, which is another game that we eventually get into. So out of these things, basically the origins of survival games have 2 core elements, and then over time these have been expanded on. So the first 2, obviously, food and water, right? Those are the 2 things that you have to have if it's a survival game. And then as time has gone on, they've added a little bit of different things into that, which I've got listed here as crafting, crafting is a big one for a survival game. Typically, being able to make an item out of multiple items or a couple different items to continue on. That's a big one. Sleep is another one. A lot of games nowadays integrate sleep into where you have to sleep or you get like your stamina runs out. Even Stardew Valley has a mechanic of sleep that you have to sleep after so long or you pass out. Then you have games out now with also things like Sanity, where if you don't eat or drink for so long or something happens that's kind of negative towards your character, you could actually go crazy. So your sanity drops and it may affect your gameplay and maybe lower your stamina throughout the game or whatever. So there's that aspect. And then the last one I have is permadeath. So permadeath is the ability to basically lose your character and be completely dead after that certain point. Now, what's interesting enough about permadeath, and we'll get into a little bit more later, but the original definition of permadeath is really like Space Invaders. Any game that you had to play, and once you died, you start over. Like, that's it. Because there was no save back then. That was why that mechanic was in the game, is because you didn't have the ability to save the game because of the way the hardware limitations were. Which fast forward later we'll talk about, but people have now added that into a mechanic to where your character dies on purpose, right? Or lose all of your character on purpose. So kind of going back, and this is, like I said, this is the survival, genre, the survival game genre. But there is a subgenre that I don't want to get into too much, but I have to kind of credit one game for this, which is survival horror genre, which is Resident Evil, the original in 1996. So Resident Evil, as I said, is a subgenre of survival, which is survival horror. But this character is basically part of a police station, tries to go into this haunted house, and when they go inside this house, there's some weird, I think it's a mansion, that's not a haunted house, but something, but it's basically got a lot of puzzles and there's like things you're trying to figure out. Obviously these weird like demon creatures that are living there as well. But one of the other things with this game is it introduced the idea of crafting. So in order to heal, you must mix together different herbs, and those different herbs, when you mix them together, give you different sort of first aid sprays to like heal yourself. Wasn't like a super thought out, mechanic, but it was like crafting. It was literally taking two items, putting them together to make something else. Another thing with this game too is there was limited amounts of like ammunition, so you can only carry so much, you can only shoot so many bullets, so you're kind of very limited on who you want to spend bullets on. Like, do you want to just not do that and maybe run past it or run away or whatever? So that was kind of something that I wanted to bring up there as far as the crafting. Now, traditionally speaking, survival game crafting, what we think about is making, a weapon, a tool, something that can kind of get you to the next portion of like the tech tree, essentially. Yeah. And
that's what I was going to say too.
Yeah.
So when I think of survival crafting, I think of making giant conveyor belts for weird cows on Craftopia and rocket ships to fly to space. I mean, whatever survival games you're playing, I guess, are just not as cool.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten that far yet.
Well, even the tech tree concept is its own rabbit hole of research coming from. 4X games always had their tech trees, and now there's probably going to be a number of things that predate on that. And it's very much where you start charting these out as you are currently doing for the survival game genre, right? You start charting these out, and you start to see how so much of these things just converge into like these homogenous combinations that we have of the genres today, because like everybody talks about the RPG-ification of all these games. Like Call of Duty now has RPG elements in it, and has for years. I mean, it's not a new thing. But it's very much, like the tech trees come from here, the survival part comes from here, the RPG part comes from here. But yeah, it's interesting seeing some of the origin of this stuff as well.
Yeah. So the first game that was credited for crafting in the sense of like survival game crafting came out in 1999. A game by Konami. It was called Survival Kids. In Japan, it was called Lost in Blue, but in the US version, it was called Survival Kids. And what it did was it gave you the ability to craft items. So you would actually have a menu where you would have a thing that says merge, and you'd click the merge button, and then you could select 2 different items. And when you merge those together, if they were able to be merged, you would get a separate tool. So, mixing like a piece of like fuzz or something with a rope, or I'm sorry, like a stick with something else, you'll actually see that here. But like it'll merge together to make like a tinder, so you can actually make a fire. And little things like that. Eventually, you can make like a fishing pole. You can make this. You can make that. But all of these things,
Dayz of Survival,
one day, yeah. So that was kind of the first game that kind of did this. Another thing this game actually also covered, which wasn't super in detail, but was the ability to sleep. So there was a point where you could actually. The game kind of railroaded you into this. It would start storming and it kind of pushed you in there and says, hey, like there's a tsunami. You should totally get inside and just sleep the night away. So you'd go inside, you'd sleep. And the next day it would say like day 4 of survival, like you're still alive. So kind of introduced a little bit of that, but it was kind of new for that. It kind of almost looked like a Pokemon style game, RPG top down, where you're kind of running around this island trying to survive. And literally you could survive this game after 365 days. Like if you get to 365 and you're still on the island, you still win. Or you could get someone to come rescue you and move on from there. But that was kind of the object. So we've covered now, like I said, food and drink. We talked about crafting. We talked about sleep. But another thing that I wanted to kind of talk about.
I also want to talk about the fact that clearly they had some problems with translation because they have sack and hut. So when they did the localization, they misspelled nut.
Nice. I mean, hey, you got to give them an A for effort,
No, I do.
Honestly, go ahead.
I do appreciate actually watching this. To interrupt your nut joke, looks very similar to some titles that you're going to bring up that evoke the 8-bit or 16-bit era and have a top down while you walk around and kill rabbits and collect meat and chop down weeds and stuff like this. You could show this video to someone today and they might not actually know what year this, or even what decade that this was created.
Yeah. If you just showed me this and I didn't know, I would play it. I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'll play that. That's cool.
You're like, this is new retro survival game,
This is just the better version of Legend of Zelda, from what I can tell.
Okay, so now you're just trying to trigger me.
I'm pretty sure that Legend of Zelda just ripped off this game, if we're being honest.
I mean, this was out before it.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh my god, I'm done. Okay, so moving on into something I forgot to mention. It's not necessarily a thing that's...
That character even looks like Zelda.
Oh my god.
Look at the menu system.
The thing that I didn't mention, because it's not really a survival game aspect, but it is a big part of the survival genre, which is multiplayer. So I started looking into trying to find the first survival like multiplayer game where you can interact with other people. And so Lost in Blue, which is Survival Kids, they did have a multiplayer together type of thing where you could on DS kind of play with someone else on the same save. But it wasn't like you know who this person was. So to kind of find that, we kind of go back to a game that we're probably all familiar with now, which is probably the best-selling game of all time, I think it is, which is Minecraft. Minecraft was released in 2009, technically. 2011
Never heard
was
of
the
it.
full release. Yeah, it's a small game, not a big deal. Not a lot of people have.
Small indie dev, yeah.
They didn't really have that in Canada. So, but not only did this game, Minecraft, have the survival mechanics of food, water, crafting, and sleep, but it also added in the sandbox world, and obviously, all pre-generated in the sense of like all these blocks are just randomly generated, and you can have a different world every time. But it also procedurally generated. Sorry, yeah. But it also allowed players to survive in an open sandbox, but also allow other people to join the same server. And that you may not know. You may not know that person. They may just be there, and with that kind of affects your gameplay. Because if you're trying to survive, but this person's either trying to help you or maybe trying to kill you. That can make your game a lot harder or easier depending on, the situation. Like there's plenty of times we've played Minecraft where like, hey, I'm going to do all the food, you're going to do all the mining, and we help each other out. Now, if we decided to just go ham on each other and kill each other, that would make things a lot more difficult.
I also appreciate that Minecraft, for the most part, especially when it started, was very much in the vein of some of the Souls games, in the fact that it didn't tell you a whole lot. Like, it didn't tell you a whole much of what you needed to do. It just kind of dropped you in there and let you do stuff and didn't explain a lot. It does now a little bit better. And it doesn't mess around because, like, it's the first night and all of a sudden zombies are coming out to get you.
Yeah, or worse, depending on what part of the map you're on. Now, another part that I wanted to mention about this game is this: when it first came out, this was the time before Discord, right? Like, I know some of us that were more privileged probably had TeamSpeak, or a friend that had a TeamSpeak server that you could join and have a voice voice conversation with them. But typically, most people didn't. So all you had was the global chat within the game, which was text chat. And, it would just say player says this, and you don't know where they're at in the world or what they're doing, but they're just saying a thing. So it wasn't easy to try to get together with other people, especially if you don't know who they are and, what time. Like, you have to communicate in game. Like, hey, I'm going to meet you at, 6 p.m. Eastern time if you want to play with me again today. So that's just kind of how the game was back then. But I wanted to
watch internet time.
Yes, watch internet
340
time.
beats.
There you go. Now, I wanted to mention that because multiplayer really did change the experience of the survival games online, or survival games, period. And during this time, I want to mention this other thing, which is in 2010, because this game came out, like I said, full release was 2011. But in 2010, a show came out called The Walking Dead. Now, The Walking Dead is, if you're not familiar with that series, is a series based on a police officer who gets in an accident. I'm not going to spoil too much if you haven't seen it, but if you lived under a rock, but gets in an accident, wakes up in the hospital, and like nobody's there. And he's like, what the heck's going on? Like, he starts uncovering that there's like all these like people dead, and turns out he's in a zombie apocalypse. And somehow he stayed alive because he was locked into a room at a hospital and was able to survive this whole zombie apocalypse. And now he's basically having to step out in the world, severely injured still, trying to just be alive and figure out the rest of his path. And the show is still actually aired today. It's still new episodes, which I think they should have ended that long time ago, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, like after season 1 or 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. But the reason I mention that is because of the survival genre. There was a game that released in 2013, actually released as a mod, and that game is called Dayz. Dayz, if you're not familiar, is a mod of a military simulator called Arma 2. So Arma 2 is basically what a lot of people say is the most realistic simulator, or Arma series, essentially. It was like the most realistic military simulator you can find. I mean, you can have like a walkie-talkie and you have to set it to a certain frequency to talk to people. There's different squads, there's tanks, there's all this stuff. But the creator of Dayz mod, his name is Dean Hall, and he actually spent a lot of years in the New Zealand Air Force, and he was inspired by the knowledge that he learned and all the survival training that he had, and he wanted to help new soldiers, basically, by means of a video game, to kind of show them survival mechanics, because he had spent a lot of time doing survival training out in the wild and realizing there's a lot of things that not just food and drink that could kill you, getting diseases or getting not being able to eat as much as you're used to, and having times where you have a lot of food and then sometimes you don't. It's just all these different mechanics that were a little more on the hardcore side of a game. But the Air Force wasn't really interested in that, so he was like, okay, well, that sucks. So he actually, once he got out of the Air Force, he joined Bohemian Interactive to work on a game called Arma 3, which is the next game after Arma 2. But during his time working there, he still had this idea of this game that he could make, this mod for Arma 2, because he already had access to that. He's like, I can make this same game, survival mechanics and everything, where you could break your limbs, you could avoid diseases, but people still weren't into it. Like they were just like, that seems, I mean, it sounds cool, but like, I don't know if I want to do that, you know? So he said, all right, screw it. I'm just going to throw zombies in it because zombies are the rage right now, literally.
Now, see, zombies are the bacon of video games. They apparently make any video game better if you just throw it in there.
Yeah. So because he threw zombies and he released it, all of a sudden people now are interested, especially with The Walking Dead doing really good. And I mentioned that because this is a game that I've played many, many hours, and I know Demiran has also played many, many hours in this game. He played more of the mod. I played more of the the standalone.
Yeah, honestly, and trash game footage. I can see why you play very many hours because this guy's just running.
Oh yeah, it's a walking simulator for sure. That's definitely.
Don't worry. You know, once you got good enough, it was like 1 hour to set up, and then like days of just murdering innocent people.
Yep, basically.
And I mean, you got to remember this game.
This dude was trying to crawl up another dude's crotch there for a second.
This game was by far like the best survival game to date, and really, the only thing that didn't survive past this game was Dean Hall's reputation. So
yeah, that's a different story as well. But the reason I compare this to The Walking Dead is not just because it has zombies in it, but it's the fact that you have the survival aspects of food and drink, but there's also like I said, all the other parts that are hardcore in the sense of like you could break your leg, and then that makes the game ultimately a lot more difficult because you couldn't walk. Like you literally would just starve out because you couldn't get to the next location. Or the other part, which is the worst part, which is other players. Yeah. Because this was an online multiplayer game and a huge open sandbox that you could literally spend hours, days playing, not see a single person. And then you feel comfortable. The next day you walk into a house to try to just random house in the middle of the woods to grab a bag of rice. You walk in, door closes behind you, guy's fully armored and says, hey, drop all your stuff. I'm taking everything from you right now or I'm going to kill you. And now you've spent multiple days playing this game, and this guy is literally going to rob you, and you don't know if he's going to kill you. He may. And this game did have permadeath. So if you died, your character was gone, all of your items are gone, and you would start over on a fresh spawn, a freshie on the coast, and basically have to start all over. And so that was the thing, was this game had... A freshie, yeah, that's what we called the people that were on the coast. So you would literally spend, hours, days playing this game, and the zombies weren't the worst part. The zombies were like kind of an annoyance at first, especially when you first start, they're kind of difficult because like you don't know how to fight them or deal with them. At least back in the older days, things have changed since then. But if you got a fire axe, that was clutch. Like first thing you want to do is try to find an axe. But if you didn't, it was hard. But once you got past a certain point, like a certain threshold, zombies weren't that big of a deal anymore. It was the people and the world that were the problem. So that would probably be the closest thing you could find to a zombie, Walking Dead simulator in that sense. So we'll get past that. But I wanted to mention that stuff because that was multiplayer in the sense of a survival game. But getting back to my list, the next one we have, second to last, is Sanity. And Sanity was something that was introduced in a game called Don't Starve, 2013. And it's based on a game that's based on your character. You're a scientist named Dr. Wilson, and you find yourself in a dark parallel world of like the actual world. So in this game, you're trying to, you obviously have to eat and drink, but you also want to keep your character's sanity level, your mental state in a normal state, because you're trying to run away from these creatures that are trying to kill you, these like dark creatures. So the more that you interact with these things, your sanity starts dropping lower, which does affect your gameplay. Because these things are trying to kill you and eat you. So and it's a really neat looking game, like almost like a comic book drawn kind of thing, but super cool. And it was an interesting thing that added the sanity mechanic. Fast forward, there's another game called Green Hell that was released fairly recently, probably a couple of years ago, which has also that sanity mechanic in it as well. More of the hardcore side where you have to like watch you breaking your legs and all this stuff. There's like leeches and stuff in that game that you have to worry about, but also has that sanity mechanic. If you get too far low on food or health, it could actually affect your gameplay. You start seeing things that, weren't actually there. Which brings me to the last one, which is permadeath. So as I said before, permadeath isn't something that was created for the survival game genre. It was actually something that the survival game genre kind of picked up on. Like they kind of used that because it seemed like something that we could mix in. But it actually comes, and as I said, Space Invaders, that's that's a permadeath game. And it wasn't intentional, but it was just the fact that they didn't have the hardware capability to save your game. Until there's a game called Rogue, Exploring the Dungeons of Doom, came out in 1980. So we're going back in time now. We're back into the 1980s, before even the first survival game, before Survival Island. And this game was a dungeon crawler video game, and the developers decided that in this game you would have a thing called permadeath, because they wanted the people to have to react and simulate like a real life decision. Instead of relying on a save that you could just go back to and then replay it to get the outcome that you wanted, they wanted a way to be able to just, whatever you make the decision on and you die, and that's it. And you just have to start over. This is also where the coined term of rogue-like comes from, because of the game called Rogue. So if it's rogue-like, it's being referred to as the game Rogue. And now this is a Unix-based game. Like, this is like old school, like back in like DOS era, 1980. Like, this is way crazy.
I actually want to see you play 2 hours of Rogue.
Yeah.
No, I'm not joking. I want to see you, it's maddeningly difficult.
Oh, I'm sure. So the other interesting part about this is, so Rogue was published for Unix, and then they actually released an MS-DOS eventually. But it was published by a company called, wait for it, Epyx. So EPYX again. So this is the same company that merged with Starpath originally, that created, and they merged in 1983. And then a few years later, they developed the game Survival Island, creating the first survival game. We have now come full circle. So this is obviously, I'm not talking about every game here. There's a lot of different survival games out there, and I mean, there's a lot of really good ones too. But I didn't have time to go through every single game right now. But I wanted to at least touch on some of these things that we kind of take for granted now in most survival games, and really, where they come from. So obviously I couldn't talk about all of it, but if you're listening or you're watching and you want to leave a comment or send us an email on something that you've played that I may have missed, or maybe a part of this that you didn't know and you want to make a comment about it, feel free to do that. Send us an email, goa@sasgaming.com, or leave a comment below on the YouTube video. But
that's
on that note,
GOA not goa at sasgaming.com. GOA@sasgaming.com.
So on that note, to take a few minutes, we're going to listen to a word from our sponsors, and we'll come back with some other stuff. And we're back. We're going to get into some games we've been playing, and Bruno is going to tell us about those right after this music.
There's more music? Okay. All right. Good. Yeah.
You're welcome.
I'm still playing Elder Scrolls Online. But Elder Scrolls Online, I mean, I've talked about it before. Elder Scrolls Online, MMORPG, one of the big three right now. I'm between them, Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft.
Did you actually ever stop playing that?
I did. I stopped playing Elder Scrolls Online for 2 years, 3 months, and some odd days.
Oddly specific.
Yes. Have you met me?
He's got spreadsheets on this.
Anyways, so I made my return.
I mean, how do you think that he has, at the tip of his fingers, exactly how many characters that he has level capped, what their race is, what their class is, and how many more he has to level cap? I mean,
that's just the database in his brain.
That is the database in my brain. You're correct.
Yes.
So I've returned to the game. Been back for a little over 2 months. Since they released the Ohio's expansion and everything. It's been fun.
The Ohio
expansion was great.
Expansion, right? So they're working on Nebraska next.
Yeah, the Ohio expansion. Yeah. It's it's weird. I guess to talk about ESO, I more so want to talk about this weird fucking phenomenon that is going on in ESO that phenomenon? It is a fuck phenomenon, actually, created by the
funk.
Sure. funk works too. You know, it doesn't matter which word you use. When I explain it, you'll be like, funk, fuck, fucked, fucking. It all works. You're going to bleep this all out, and it's going to be great.
Nope.
So,
Bleep
the
it.
game has...
meme that shit.
Perfect. The game has update U35 coming, or U36. I think it's U30. It's U35. I want to say it's U35. It doesn't matter what the number is. The developers long ago were like, community, you hate everything we do. What should we do? And they were like, don't screw with combat. Stop touching it. You guys are terrible at tweaking combat. You're awful at it. Stop touching it. Don't touch it ever again. They were like, we promise that we will never screw with combat again. To update U35, complete combat overhaul. The exact opposite of not screwing with combat. And I'm now watching this like crazy influx of negativity in the community that is so bad that the economy, which I pay attention to very carefully in the game, is like collapsing over the fact that so many old players with ridiculous amounts of money are just vanishing from the game. Because like every MMO has to have
kidnapped or...
Oh no, they're being exiled by a shitty update. Did you miss that part?
No, it's funnier when I say it.
It's funnier when you say that they're kidnapped. I mean, I hope they're not being kidnapped. And if they are, I would hope that their kidnappers would send me their account information. But anyways,
just mail you the gold. That's fine.
Most MMOs have major gold sinks, right? Something to make players spend their money that disappears forever. ESO barely has anything like that. It has housing, and even then the housing system does not work as a money sink. So the economy can really track how bad the player base is being impacted by decisions that developers are making. And it's gone down like 20% in less than 2 weeks, just based on the announcement of one update. So they released the PTS. Everybody was like, this is terrible. This is the worst update in the history of updates. Please don't do this. And they were like, okay, we heard you. Here's the second version.
The PTSD.
So yeah, PTS version 2 comes out and everyone's like, this is still bad. You just made some things slightly less bad, but then other things significantly worse. And they were like, oh, okay. Third version, this is just the same level of bad. Fourth version, this is a different brand of bad. And then the fifth version was like, you made it worse. And they're like, well, the fifth version is the final version. It releases next week, so you're going to deal with it next week, as in literally next week, that is coming up. So I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm trying to like stay positive and not quit this game, but I'm watching as the entire community is on fire, and you cannot go anywhere in that game without people being like, yeah, this game's trash. It's a dead game. U35 is going to end Microsoft Gaming Studios all on its lonesome. It's the end of the world. But I don't know.
Or
Elder Scrolls Online.
Or is this just the long con that they're plotting the demise of ESO so that they can release Elder Scrolls 6 and not have their competition with themselves?
So by Elder Scrolls 6, though, you mean Elder Scrolls
like the Rockstar
5, Skyrim, but again.
Well, yeah, I mean, why mess with something that works? I mean,
yeah, I think the 100th version of Skyrim is Elder Scrolls 6.
Why release 5 versions of a combat system and then release the worst one?
They actually recapped this year that ESO 2 is not going to be a thing. They're like, ESO is just going to continue to be expanded on for like ever, as far as we care.
Yeah, I mean, we've EverQuest has proven that, you know, the concept is not to release a new version; it's to upgrade the version that you have. I mean, Warcraft learned from them.
Final Fantasy, on the other hand, was like, here's Final Fantasy 14, and they were like, hold on, actually, just kidding. Here's Final Fantasy 14 Reborn. Whoops.
But again, it wasn't Final Fantasy 15. It was Final Fantasy 14.
But it was a whole new game.
It was, but they kept it the same name.
They did keep the same number. But there's just so many numbers. Like, how many Final Fantasies can there really be?
Well, I mean,
so final.
Infinite amounts, I guess.
Apparently
Also, yeah,
16,
it is the Final Fantasy, so there's been 16 final ones.
Yeah, or
But,
16 is coming up, I think.
I'm playing ESO. I now have many characters at 50, many endgame sets. I am in the PvP phase of my playtime right now, which means that next week's going to really suck when they change everything. And I'm like clinging to like the top 20.
I know I'm going to regret this question.
Uh-oh.
But you said you're in the PvP phase of your playing. So, Murin, what exactly are your phases of playing that you go through?
Oh, God.
Leveling up as many characters as I feel like I want to play the class for.
Okay, so that's the first 30 minutes of gameplay. Sure, tell us a little bit more.
Each character takes roughly on ESO 2 to 4 hours to level to cap for me. Anyways, so then once that's done,
2 to 4 hours.
Goes the PvE grinding for gear, which I do mostly on my healer because I get instant gears.
Okay, I get that. PvE grinding, okay.
Gather all my gear, and then comes in the PvP-esque/PvE obtaining of certain pieces of gear and mythics. And then I build out...
So you're saying going out and getting cool gear while griefing other players is what you just said, right?
Not exactly. You don't grief players at that point in time.
PvP.
It's inefficient to grief other players, but you do have to go into PvP areas to get the stuff that you need to get the gear. It's actually more beneficial to avoid the players at that point in time. Then enters the PvP phase. Now I have all these different sets of gear that are all like the best possible builds that you can try and get together. Then you go out and grief all of the players, which has been really fun because there's CP levels in the game, which are the levels past level cap, and I am CP level 622, which sounds like it would be high, but it's not, because the real like hardcore players are all like 2,000 to 3,600. What's really entertaining is being a low CP level of 600 and griefing the 3,000 plus level players to the point where they're like raging on stream about how you make them want to quit the game, which is exactly what I have been doing for the last 2 weeks of my life.
Oh,
it's great.
I told you I'd regret that question.
Yeah.
How did you regret that question?
It was a good one.
It's amazing.
It was
Come on. It's like the best. That's the best thing is either griefing other people or carrying people that are trash through content that they have no place being in.
So basically when I play with you. Got it. Cool.
No, I said trash, not like literal garbage. Just trash. You're a couple steps below that. Got him! Yeah.
Oh my god.
But yeah, that's ESO for you. It's free to play if you want to consider it that.
Yeah, I mean, I played a good bit of... I would say a good bit compared to you. I played what I would consider a good bit of ESO, and it was because of that, it being free, like something that I didn't have to pay a subscription to right away, at least. And it was interesting. It was fun.
You played a lot more Fortnite than you played ESO.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, ESO is really good for a lot of people for the story.
Yeah, MMOs are not my thing. I've probably talked about that in the past, but I mean, I definitely gave it a good college try.
It's not as immediately engaging as like a game like Lost Ark.
Yeah,
I feel like Lost Ark, you kind of like you come in and they just throw you into the thick of it, and immediately every single person who plays Lost Ark is like, for the most part, is like, this is really engaging, even if it's only for a little bit. Whereas ESO, you like kind of come in and you're like, I'm really weak and useless, and I have one ability. What do I do? So it has that same slow uptick.
Mean, Lost Ark used to be that way, and Lost Ark like sanded down all the rough edges, and they're like, oh, well, you used to have to go up like 7 or 8 levels before you could get your prestige class. Like, no, we're going to skip all that. We're just going to dump you right in your prestige class from the get-go. And Lost Ark used to have that thing of like, go out and kill 12 rats or pick up 15 books. And like every one of those now, they're like, I've left some books on the plane. Go and pick them up. And you go out and you pick up a book. It's like, oh, you're done. Turn in your quest. And by the way, you can just turn it in from here. You don't even have to go back if you don't want to. It's like,
yeah.
So I mean,
don't worry. When you get to the end game, they make you pay for it. They make you pay for it dearly because you get there and you're like, oh yeah, you want to do that new content? What's your gear score? And everybody's like, yeah, what's your gear score, huh? What's your gear score? And you're like, it's 1410. They're like, 1410? You're an embarrassment. And then you're like, okay, well, how long will it take me to get to 1430? And they're like, I don't know. You want to play 20 hours a day, 10 hours a day, or 2 hours a day? 4? Looking like 3 months from now. At best, if you're lucky. How lucky are you? Not very lucky. 6 months. Okay. They're fixing that because American...
Or how much cash do you want to drop?
That's true, but even then there's a limit. You can only spend 1,000 USD a day. So, I mean, but a pittance. You're shaking your head, but 1,000 USD a day at certain points in the gearing process, that still takes you a couple months. Yeah. Don't underestimate how many hundreds of thousands of dollars it takes to be number one. All right.
Yeah. Right.
Or rigging the market
somewhere.
There's many. Anyways,
so Brian, what have you been playing?
I don't know. Tell me about these turtles on a half shell.
What?
Damn, he just threw that back at you.
I see that. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I played. So,
which, by the
if
way,
you're not
implies
familiar,
that you're like eating the turtles because like that's similar to oysters, like the half shell.
I mean,
pretty terrible, actually.
If that's what you want to call it. So I actually played Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I believe it's called Shredder's Revenge. It is. So I want to make sure I pull it up. It's called Shredder's Revenge, and it's literally a sequel to the original Turtles in Time from the early 90s. And what's great about this game, so it's released on Xbox Game Pass for free if you want to pick it up. There's also I think it's available on Steam as well for a price, I'm sure. But the neat part about this game is it does feel like a literal pickup continuation from the original Turtles in Time. From the time that you boot the game, it sucks you in. Like, it's a nostalgia trip all the way through. And I'm not saying nostalgia trip because, like, I just want to feel like nostalgia because it's the thing that I used to play. And no, it's legit like the same like game. It just new story, new like not even new mechanics, just new story. Like, it's just like you're ready to go. So I booted it up with a couple friends of mine. We actually play up to 6 players. We only played 3. You can actually play as Splinter, and I think also as Casey Jones, and I think maybe even Shredder. I'm not even sure. But it basically drops you in. There's actually music done by the singer of Faith No More. He does like the main theme song, which actually I can't remember his name, but he called it. And my brother would probably hate me for this, but pulls it back a little bit to kind of do the singing here because usually he's like very, defined in his singing type. Anyway, it's a super cool like rendition of this game, and it basically you drop in and you have side scrolling left to right. You're basically fighting through all the different Foot Clan, and you see some old characters that you're familiar with. You see some new characters you're not familiar with. And the story, each level basically has some hidden elements. Like you find certain people and certain parts or certain things, and they'll say like, "Hey, collect all of my newspapers that I forgot somewhere in the world." And like every level, like as you play through the game, you may find these newspapers, and if you collect all of those, you'll get like extra XP or something just to kind of give you something else. But man, I mean, what a fun time! We had such a blast playing this. It was such a good experience to be able to play this game that really felt, and it looks and feels just like the old game, except you're literally playing all new content, and it's just like continuation of a new story. And it was such a cool thing. And there's not really much else to talk about that, but it was so fun. I definitely suggest if you either have Game Pass or if you want to do something else, like pick it up on Steam or somewhere else, Epic or whatever, I would say do it. It's definitely worth it. It's definitely a good time, especially with some friends. And it's just, cowabunga, dude.
So I've been playing 2 Point Campus, which is available currently on Xbox Game Pass, or you can get on Steam for, I believe it's $40 essentially. Don't believe the hype. At $39.99 is $40. Actually, I think it's interesting because 2 Point Hospital, which was the game before it, is currently $35. So it's only $5 less. So it's holding its value, as it were. Not that you can resell it, but it's the first 2 Points game I played. I've played lots of simulator-ish type games, like tycoon games. This is very much in the tycoon genre, right? Roller Coaster Tycoon, where it's not like The Sims where you control a person so much, but you are managing the environment around them.
You're kind of managing. Work for their needs. And I haven't played this. I've played 2 Point Hospital, but yeah, it's very much that you set up, like in 2 Point Hospital, you set up rooms and you assign people to that, and they kind of just do the job. Like you don't say like click and drag this person over here. Kind of thing.
Doing that because you're trying to fulfill the needs of someone else. So someone else is like, you're like, I'm in emotional distress. So you set up a room and staff it that helps them through something like that. 2 Point Campus being college based. One of the things that I appreciate is, the first college, as it were, the first campus is very much your tutorial. But you get like 4 campuses in, because you only need 1 star on a campus to be able to move to the next one. Now you could keep going on that first campus. You could keep making money. You could keep unlocking stuff. And you could play the heck out of that campus, 3-star, build up a lot of money. As you go to these other campuses, though, they introduce new mechanics, and the way they do it tends to be pretty nice. You could just be doing your own thing, and this new mechanic can happen over here, and you could actually ignore it for a minute and like not pay attention to this person that's going, hey, you got invaders now, and this is how you handle the invaders. You're just like, oh wait, let me finish these 5 things I'm adjusting over here to make things better. And it's not so forcefable in its tutorial or its introduction of these new mechanics, but they're still there where you still have to interact with them, right? So you're still going to learn them. One of the things I do appreciate this is as you continue on, you're unlocking items. By doing accomplishments, you unlock this just in-game currency that you use to unlock different things you can place in the world. New aesthetic things that just look nice, some things that actually affect things around them by their attractiveness or by their ability to increase like study potential. And very much they're things that you don't need to unlock because you have the base ones for the most part. Some of them you're just naturally going to unlock. But the cool thing is once you unlock them on one campus, they're unlocked for all campuses.
That's cool.
Once you earn the currency, that currency follows you and is available in all the next campuses. So you're not starting all over with 0 of this like special currency. You have that. So when a student specifically makes a request and says, hey, I'd really like blah in the student lounge. And you're like, well, I have a boatload of that currency right now, and this is going to make you happy. So this doesn't cost me any of the money that I'm running the campus with. And you're just like, bam, let me unlock that. Let me place it for like $100 of the currency in the, for the campus currency. And you actually get about the 5th campus in before it actually becomes like a challenge. You start with $0, so you have to start with a loan. And on top of it, you have an antagonist for the first time.
You just start with a loan? They don't give you starting money? That's wild.
On the 5th campus in. Yeah. Wow. Up until then, you have starting money. So they actually they make it pretty challenging. People who play these games, it won't be challenging, but I'm sure there's ways to make it more challenging. It's kept my interest really nicely. I am on Spiffendor or Spiffenmore, which is literally I get to create my own Hogwarts campus, essentially. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate you can go back to any of your old campuses. You can keep playing them. They have a lot of extra lots that you can buy, so you can really expand and make your campuses really big. If you don't like the shape of your building, you can like buy stuff to expand your building. And it's all really accessible as far as, the dollars that you're earning. That makes it really easy. I think I spent a brutto amount of time the other day playing it while I was doing some other things.
You spent 3 months in one day?
Pretty much.
Wow.
Like you asked my partner and she's like, you literally have been playing that all day long. And I was like, yes, I have.
Good.
So it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. I will probably show a little bit because I know that Mike here has been eagerly awaiting the release of the new Hogwarts game anyway. So now
actually,
it's here.
I installed it, 2 Campus. I haven't played it because I've been waiting for you to kind of tell me if I wanted to play it or not. So it sounds like it's something it's already installed. I just got to click play. I've been kind of waiting, but it sounds good.
Yeah,
check it out.
And I'm actually curious because even when I went to Spiffendor, they introduced new mechanics. So I'm really interested in the fact that what new mechanics are going to come. Like it was, I think 3 campuses in before they introduced the fact that you could train your staff and increase their stats, and that you could research things to create your lecterns and different items around the campus that are in the rooms that you could increase them to the next level and make them more effective. So I think the learning curve, like there's a lot of people that could look at this game and see a good way to make a learning curve, as well as making it something that is kind of unobtrusive. Like it's in your face. It tells you, I mean, some of the parts it has to, but at the same time, it just feels like this natural progression of like, oh, I thought I had learned everything and I was getting really good at this. And then all of a sudden you've opened up this whole new thing over here that I can do. At the same time, if they had done that all out on the first campus, it would have been way overwhelming with all the different menus you could go to and all the different things you could look at and all the different stats and all the different things you could touch, that you would bounce off of it in a couple of days because it's just too much. But since they pace it out really nicely, it really becomes something that's accessible. So very fun game.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll have to, like I said, it's already installed. I just got to click play. So that's good to know. Add it to my list of things I want to play. So, well, cool. That's what we've been playing this week. And that's the wrap of our show. So if you've liked this video, or if you're listening and you want to help us out a little bit more, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/SASgaming. And you can check out our different tiers there. We have some things available for you. Other than that, send us an email, goa@sasgaming.com. You can check it out. Send us an email. Tell us what you like, didn't like, something that you want us to maybe cover in the future. Whatever. Just send us an email. We'd love to read something. That'd be great. So, obviously, if you're watching the video, like and subscribe. We really do appreciate that. Every single bit of every person who does that really does help us a lot, and we do appreciate it. So until next time, you guys be safe out there, take it easy, and we'll see you guys in a few weeks. Well, next time. See ya.